Hey everybody, and welcome to Dominion Cards. This is a video series where we take a strategic, in-depth look at various cards from the board game Dominion. Today we're looking at Artisan. This is a 6-cost action card from the 2nd edition base game, and it says gain a card to your hand, costing up to 5. Put a card from your hand onto your deck. Now, because you have to do these instructions in order, this means that the card that you put onto your deck could be the card that you just gained, because that card goes straight into your hand, but it doesn't have to be. Now let's look at these effects on this card, roughly in this sort of order. So first of all, gaining a card to your hand costing up to 5. So Artisan is a very powerful gaining card. Most of the time when you look at cards that can gain other cards, like for example Workshop, they are restricted to costing 4 or less. If a card can gain a card costing more than 5, a lot of the times there's going to be some sort of condition attached. So Remodel, for example, can gain cards costing more than 4, but you have to trash fairly expensive cards in order to do that. Artisan does not have any condition attached whatsoever. It just gains a card costing up to 5, and that's pretty strong. I've mentioned it in a number of these videos, but 5-cost cards are a lot stronger than 4-cost cards normally. It's an important price point, which really, there is a big level of separation between the cards at those different price points. So gaining the more expensive cards is usually going to be a lot better. Now, Artisan can get cheaper cards as well. It's not restricted to only 5-cost cards. So while normally with Artisan you would look to gain the more expensive cards because the expensive cards are typically going to be better, in reality you should be gaining the cards that are best for your deck at that time. So it might be that you want a good balance of like Terminal Draw and Villages, for example, or maybe you just need something better at that time, something that works better for you now, like a junking attacker, I don't know, anything like that. Sometimes stuff that's cheaper is going to be better. Now, bear in mind you do get your buy as well, and sometimes you will be buying the cheaper card, so, just take into account how much money and buys you have to buy, and before you play Artisan, think about what you're buying as well, so that you basically maximise the utility of the card that you're going to gain. It's going to fit in best with the other cards that you're about to add to your deck in your buy phase. Now, Artisan isn't just gaining you 5-cost cards. Those 5-cost cards are going straight into your hand. Now, gaining cards directly to your hand is the best possible place to gain them to, typically, because that means that you could potentially play them straight away as long as you've got the spare action. So we have a terminology in Dominion that we call gain and play, and that's just a case where you gain a card to your deck and then you get to play it on the same turn, and that's usually very strong because your deck can improve very substantially very quickly when you do that. It's also a lot harder to tell what your opponent is capable of doing on their turn if they can add more functionality to their deck during the turn and then use it. They don't have to wait to the next turn if they can play it straight away. So normally when you have a deck that is doing these gain and play things, it's going to be pretty fast. When you see people doing that, you know that their deck can get better a lot quickly. Artisan just does this for you automatically because the card goes straight to your hand. And because the cards that it gains are also really powerful cards because they cost 5, Artisan in the right sort of board can improve your deck substantially very, very quickly. This is a real big acceleration card, just because, it's gaining really powerful cards and you use them straight away. Now, what happens early on in the game when you haven't got your deck under control? I did make a caveat that to play the card on the same turn, you need to have another action available to play it. And really early on in the game, you might not have that because you haven't got to the stage where you're drawing your whole deck, you haven't added enough villages to it, and so on. So sometimes it will gain the card to your hand, but you don't really get to play it now. Well, the good news with Artisan is that it lets you put that card you just gained directly on top of your deck. So you might still get the opportunity to play that card before you next shuffle your deck, and that means that you still essentially got a play in before you otherwise would have with a more typical gainer that gains it to your discard. This isn't always going to be the case. Sometimes it will miss the shuffle, so to speak, just because when you draw your next 5-card hand, you're going to shuffle when you do that. But, Artisan will sometimes let you get away with playing that card immediately, which is going to be really good if it's something like Witch, right? You want to play that Witch, and then you want it to shuffle it in, and then you want to play it again, like next turn or something. So even if you get Artisan pretty early on, it's still very fast. One of the problems that gainers sometimes have really early on is that you have to wait until you shuffle your deck again, until you actually get to play the thing that you buy, or that you gained, and if you haven't got your deck under control yet, that could be a couple of turns, so you sort of get that little slowdown with that card that you want to play. It's going to take you a while until you get to play it if you get it via a gainer instead of gaining it straight away. Now, Artisan, because it costs 6, there's sometimes you luck into getting like a 6 coin turn on turn 3, like you have a silver and 4 coppers, for example, and you have to make a decision to say, like, do I want to get that Witch first, or would I rather gain the Artisan? Well, Artisan is really nice, because if you do like get the Witch, you're not necessarily going to get more plays in sooner than if you got the Artisan, because if you go for the Artisan, you get to gain the Witch and then top deck it and then still play it on the next shuffle, as opposed to if you just bought the Witch now instead of the Artisan. So choosing Artisan over playing one of these important 5-cost cards is not necessarily going to slow you down, or at least that much, in terms of the amount of time you get to play that other card. So Artisan's really, really fast in that regards, letting you just immediately use the cards that you want to gain with it. You do not lose tempo at all. Like, it keeps up your deck continuing at a fast pace. So Artisan tends to be a pretty high priority because it allows you to play the cards that you gain so quickly. Now, the top decking on this card, this is sort of framed as a penalty on the card. So normally, if you have forced to top deck cards from your deck when you otherwise don't want to, this is sort of slowing down your ability to draw through your deck. This is because you had to draw a card and then you top deck it and then you have to draw it again. So you're sort of adding an extra card, that shuffle, to what you want to draw. However, it's not really a disadvantage in this case for a couple of reasons. Number one is that you can just put the card on top of your deck is one that you want to play. So, like the examples of that Witch, you actually wanted to play at this shuffle, so top decking it is good rather than bad. You don't care that it takes one more card to get through your shuffle, because it was much more important that you played the Witch this shuffle instead. Or it could be something like a laboratory, and you sort of get to put it in your next hand to start with a lab in your hand, and that's just going to make your next hand much better. So you don't really care that you've added one lab to draw because it was a laboratory, right? Ideally, the cards that you're gaining with Artisan are going to be very, very strong cards, so it's absolutely fine to put a brand new, very powerful card on top of your deck, because the aim of cycling through your deck and getting to those shuffles is to play those powerful cards more quickly. And if you just get to play it now or next turn, then you don't really care that much that you're actually not cycling through your deck very quickly. So Artisan's got this sort of top decking penalty thing that a lot of the time is actually not a penalty at all. It's actually to the card's advantage that it does this. So Artisan just has this really nice combination of powerful effects that work really well together. So top decking isn't just about top decking the card that you just gained for some sort of like next turn seeding. It does other things as well. Now, you may notice if you watch the Harbinger video, that is another card that's in the base set that top decks, and I didn't really go through this. And there's 2 reasons for that. Number one, Harbinger isn't actually a very good card, like in terms of it can top deck, and that can still be useful, but it's quite difficult to get its top deck to kick off, so it's not super great using it for those sorts of effects. But second thing is that I simply just forgot. That's why it's not on the video. So I'm going to go through a bit here. So some cards really like knowing what the top card of your deck is. So Vassal from the base game, we talked about this in the Vassal video. If you know what the top card of your deck is, then you know whether you can safely play the Vassal or not. Artisan allows you to specifically set up a Vassal. You can gain like a laboratory, and then you play the Vassal, and oh look, your Vassal just found a laboratory to play. Well, that's really good for Vassal. Artisan actually got called out in the Vassal video as being a particularly nice card to allow you to guarantee a Vassal play now and then. And it's true, right? Vassal works really nicely with Artisan because Artisan lets you set up your top deck. But I've got 2 other examples here of cards that try to blindly trash the cards at the top of your deck. So Lookout looks at the top 3 and you must trash one of them. Well, with Artisan, you can gain a good card to your hand. You can put like an estate on top of your deck, and then you play a Lookout from your hand, and oh, look at that, there was an estate on top of your deck, so now you get to trash it. So that Lookout can be like a risky card, and removing all of that risk is really good for it. So Artisan works well with cards like that. Necromancer is another example that I put in just because it's a lot easier to forget that Necromancer actually trashes the top card of your deck, because it gets to play this Zombie Mason card that starts the game in the trash, that will trash the top card from your deck, and you may choose to gain stuff. Now that's sort of very risky, Zombie Mason. It can get you nice effects. But you really want to be able to trash very specific cards most of the time. It's quite risky to just trash cards willy-nilly from your deck without knowing what they are. Cards like Artisan really help you set that up to make sure that you are going to trash exactly the card you want. Now, there are other examples. So like I could talk about like Scrying Pool, for example, and there are more if you think about them. But I don't want to list every possible card that benefits from top decking. Just be aware of that. Now, there are other cards like Sentry, that's another base game card, that specifically do not care about the top card of your deck, but actually care about the second card in your deck. So Sentry, before it looks at cards to trash, it does draw one first. So top decking like a Curse with Artisan, and then playing a Sentry, well, you're just going to draw the Curse. You're not actually going to be able to trash it with the top decking. However, sometimes you might know what the top card of your deck is. So maybe you have 2 Artisans and you top deck a Curse, and then you look to top deck another card. What that does in that case is you can sort of make sure that you find the other card to be the one that you want by basically using Artisan's top decking ability to make sure that your Sentry doesn't draw the card that you're trying to trash. Now, I know that here I'm doing a lot of work by saying like, oh, you happen to know a Curse is on top of your deck. Like a lot of the time, how do you know that? Unless like the Curse, for example, is in your discard and there's no other card in your draw pile, a lot of the time you're not going to know. You might need other cards that give you deck inspection to figure this out, like Cartographer or something. So you don't necessarily see this that often, but if you have the terminal space to play a lot of Artisans, then you can actually set this up. You can get cards like Magpie and Herald and Wishing Well. By playing 2 Artisans, you can sort of guarantee them to know what the second card is. But, it's something to keep in mind, but you see it a lot less often than the direct top, the cards that care about directly what is on top of your deck. So another important part of Artisan is that it doesn't have any restriction on the type of card that you're allowed to gain. Now, it does say gain a card to your hand costing up to 5, but it doesn't say anything like it can't be a victory card. Now, when you look at some other powerful gainers, like, for example, Haggler, Haggler is a card that gains you a whole bunch of cards very easily, but it explicitly says on it that you're not allowed to gain victory cards with it, because usually that would just be really powerful. Artisan does not have this restriction. It can gain duchies and even like treasure cards as well, no problem at all. So gaining duchies is usually pretty powerful towards the end of the game. Like typically most decks, because victory cards are so bad, what they actually want to do is just gain as many victory cards as possible, as late as possible. So, the platonic ideal is picking up all 8 provinces in one turn, but you can't actually do that most of the time. What you want to do, though, is instead try and spread out gaining points over as fewer turns as possible and just sort of go all in all of a sudden and gain a load all at once. So Artisan is really nice in that it lets you just gain a whole load of duchies on one turn. There is a problem, of course, and that is that you can be forced to top deck those duchies. If you did need to play every other card that you had in your hand, then once you gain the duchies, you have no choice other than to top deck some sort of useless victory card, which is probably going to be those of the same duchies. And that's going to be really bad for your next turn. Starting your turn with victory cards in your hand is often going to be pretty terrible. And I think that's sort of part of the reason why Artisan gets to exist, given how powerful it is, just because top decking those duchies is going to be so bad for you that it's not completely crazy, right? You can completely screw yourself by trying to gain a lot of points with Artisan. Now, I have written here, top decking Duchies is often very bad unless you won't have another turn otherwise. What do I mean by this? Well, sometimes you just don't have another turn. Like, if you end the game by, like, buying the remaining provinces or emptying some third pile, you are free to gain and top deck Duchies with your artisans, because it won't matter if you top deck a load of victory cards, because you're not going to have another turn. This is something also that I forgot to mention in my Council Room video that I only really noticed when I was writing this. Council Room is negative effect of drawing your opponent cards. Doesn't really matter if your opponent doesn't have another turn because you end the turn. In general, any card that has some sort of negative effect for you tends to matter less if it is the final turn of the game. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, how do we deal with this whole thing of gaining Duchies with Artisan and being forced to top deck them? Well, one nice thing to do is to have extra cards in your deck that you don't really need to play that turn. So that means like having an excess set of like villages or labs, or this is something we call overdraw. Mostly it's going to involve that. So that is where you have the capability to draw more cards in your deck than you actually have in hand. And that's really good here because you gain the duchy and then you have something else that you can top deck instead. So, you know, if you don't need to play that lab, then you can gain the duchy and you can top deck the lab, and then you've top decked a good card instead of a bad card. So you've got to keep in mind, you know, Artisan really likes decks that draw themselves quite well. Sometimes top decking green cards can be worthwhile, so you could skip them with Farming Village. You might have cards like Shepherd, but you know, we're not going to go too much into that. We'll talk about those when we talk about those specific cards themselves, but bear in mind that for the most part, top decking Duchies is a pretty bad thing for you to do. Now, the main problem that Artisan has, right, its stated disadvantage isn't much of a disadvantage, but it does have one big disadvantage going for it, and that is its cost, right? This card costs 6. You'd expect it to be very powerful at that cost, and it is, but you've got to actually hit 6. Your deck, when you start the game, it's pretty bad at hitting 5, and it's completely useless at hitting 6. It just can't do it. So even if you add like a silver, it's still pretty hard to hit 6. You can do it very rarely, but it's actually very unlikely. Some cards allow you to just get a big burst of money on those early turns, and that can be really good for Artisan. You know, we know that Artisan doesn't slow you down from achieving any of the other goals that you want your deck to do, so the sooner you can get it, the better usually, and that means ways to spike up to 6 early is really good in Artisan's case. So there's quite a lot of cards that do stuff like this, and again, I can't give you a fully comprehensive list, and I don't think that would be super useful to try and remember all these sorts of combos, but here are just some sort of examples of things that you can do. So Smithy from the base game, I actually mentioned this explicitly in its video, but it can be pretty good at hitting 6 early because it draws you so many cards and it's easy to just open with it. Mining Village from Intrigue, it draws you a card and then you optionally get to trash it for 2 coins. So you wouldn't normally open with a village, but Mining Village can be like +1 card and 2 money as well, and normally you're happy to blow up a mining village and lose the village just to get the artisan. And in fact, you normally wouldn't open with village, but mining village lets you get that big money boost if you open with it. So, and then if you miss for whatever reason, you just, when you draw it, you draw your card and realise that even blowing it up, you won't actually be able to hit 6. Well, you get to keep it, and then you got a village, right? So it's sort of that. There's a little bit of risk involved, but if it doesn't work out, then it's not the end of the world. You still got a nice card to your deck. Stockpile from Menagerie. This is just a incredible early money spiking card. You get very big turns very fast with Stockpile. There's just an example. You know, you only get to play it once at first, but it's just an extra coin over silver. So if you think any time a silver would have helped you hit 5, if it was a Stockpile instead for the same cost as silver, you actually hit 6 otherwise. So, you know, Stockpile makes your odds pretty good at hitting 6. Save an event from Adventures lets you put a card from your hand this turn and keep it around for next turn, and it actually goes into your hand rather than top decking it. So if you, for example, on turn 3, you only get like 3 coins or something, or 2, you can say to yourself, well, it looks like, you know, I'm not able to get that much good this turn, but I have a high chance of at least hitting 5 next turn. What you can do is choose to just save one of your coppers for next turn, and then you might turn a 5 into a 6. Pageant from Renaissance. This allows you to, it's sort of similar to save, but it allows you to essentially trade coppers that you've not spent or any sort of money and save one of them for a future turn. So that's just like a little bit more flexible version of save. There are lots of other examples, but these are just ways that when you see them around, you can think, maybe I can hit 6 early because these cards just let me get a big boost early on. And you really want to watch out for that with Artisan, because getting to 6 can be quite difficult otherwise. So when is Artisan bad? We've talked a lot about this being a really good card. It's because it's just a gainer, and it gains cards that are available in the kingdom. It's going to depend a lot on what's in the rest of the kingdom. Now, normally there are pretty good cards available in the kingdom, especially at the 5 cost price point, but sometimes they just aren't. Sometimes kingdoms are very weak, and they are bad, and typically gaining a lot of those kingdom cards is not going to help you very much on some boards. So it could be that every action is, you've got 10 actions and they're all terminal. None of them have plus action on it. We don't really want that many terminals in that case. Now, Artisan's pretty bad at gaining silvers. If you're only going to use Artisan to gain silvers, then bear in mind you could have bought a gold instead of the Artisan. It's going to be way better for you. So you wouldn't use it to get cheap treasure like silver usually. If there is some non-terminal actions, but there's no village, then sometimes you can find that you only get to play 1 terminal per turn, and Artisan can lose out, because even though Artisan is a powerful effect, there could be some really powerful attack, like Witch or Militia, for example. We've seen that in some of my Kingdom analysis sections at the end of these videos where Artisan is there, but you can only play 1 card, and actually you would much rather play the strong attacks, so it can sort of miss out in those cases. Lastly, although we said the top decking is not normally a problem, the reality is that decks that struggle to draw, it actually can really slow them down, and you will start finding all your cards slightly less because Artisan is just top decking cards and it's slowing you down drawing your deck. So if it's taking you multiple turns to draw your deck because, like, for example, there is no draw, then Artisan, although it's billed as a fast card, it can actually slightly slow you down in those cases, so it's usually not very good. Also, in those sorts of decks, Artisan's not generating you any money, even though it's gaining you cards directly, so it might not be so good. You just have these turns where you're just gaining cards and then you're buying something cheap, but what you actually want to do is just have a lot of money in your hand, and Artisan's not really the card that you want in those cases. You would rather have gold in those sorts of cases. So overall, Artisan is an incredibly strong card. It's definitely one of the top 5 cards in the 2nd edition base set. Is it better than Chapel? No. Is it better than Witch? I don't think so. Sentry and Throne Room? It's probably around the same sort of power. I think they're all probably roughly around the same place, those 3 cards. I could see it probably like Throne Room, then Smithy, then Artisan or something. But, those top 5. Artisan is very powerful. It should look very powerful by gaining cards to your hand, and that they can cost 5 or more, and it is, right? It's very strong. What's really nice about it is that sometimes there are certain cards that you really want to play as quickly as possible, and Artisan doesn't stop you from doing that. It doesn't get in the way of playing one of those key cards, because when you gain the key card of Artisan, you get to play it straight away or on the next turn. So it doesn't suffer you any tempo loss in that regard. This means that it's usually a very high priority 6. Sometimes you want to wait on 6s a little bit, but not with Artisan. You want to try and hit 6 as soon as you can, because it's usually a very high priority, just because it's so strong and it speeds you up a lot. It's useful all through the game, because even at the end of the game, when you don't need the engine components as much anymore, it can start gaining you your points. So you can get quite a lot of points from your Artisans. You buy an Artisan early on, and then if it's gained you 2 Duchies through the game, that was, the same points as buying a province, right? But it did all this other gaining for you. So wow, Artisan, very good like that. It really likes you to be able to draw a lot to seed your next hand. You may notice throughout this PowerPoint, I didn't really talk about cost reduction in the way that I did in the workshop video, so it's the same sort of thing there. If you have cost reduction, Artisan, of course, can start gaining you even better cards, but bear in mind that, one of the main things with cost reduction with Workshop is that you very easily go from gaining 4 cost cards to gaining 5 cost cards. Whereas with Artisan, if you play 1 cost reduction, that can get you golds. I mean, it's not super brilliant. And then, you have to play 1 less to be able to start gaining provinces with it. But, it's not quite as exciting as it is for stuff like Workshop, but, it still is a thing. But I don't feel the need to repeat myself on that with Artisan. Just be aware that that is a thing. Anyway, so that's that for that video. So what we're going to do is we are going to go to the online client, as always, and we are going to generate some random baseboards that have Artisan in it, and we're going to see what we think it's doing in that kingdom. So what have we got going on here? Well, there's no trashing on this board, but there is Witch. So Witch is going to be real nice here. Now, we have Festival and Village as villages. The problem is that we have a lot of bad junk cards on this board. We're not super excited about gaining a lot of cards with Artisan. The problem is that even if we try and gain a bunch of villages and smithies, it's going to take way too long. We wouldn't go for smithies, we'd go for witches. We want to try and, hit Witch. We're going to open Silver Militia, I guess, to stop our opponents hitting Witch. With Militia around, it's also going to be quite hard to hit 6. And once we got the Witch, I think we would rather just go Witch big money. Because there is no trashing and we have so much junk, I think we're never really going to be able to build a functional draw deck. And in that case, going for villages is not very helpful, and therefore we would rather be playing witches and militias. So we're going to be picking those up. Poacher's probably okay. You know what? Even Harbinger's probably fine here, just because it's a general slow cycling sort of engine. I think Artisan can be skipped on this board. I think that it's not really doing anything for you. I would rather buy a gold when I hit 6 and just try and cycle through my deck by playing witches. Playing militia, and only really playing 1 action card per turn. So I think Artisan doesn't work on this board because the engine is too difficult to build. If you try and gain council rooms for big draw, then what you're really going to be doing is giving your opponent who's doing Witch big money, giving them a very good time. So what have we got here? So here's the opposite for trashing. We have Chapel and we have Sentry. Now this game, unfortunately, has no village at all. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to take a chapel and we're going to trash down, and we're going to open chapel and militia, and we're going to want to hit sentry. If we do hit 6 for Artisan, that's nice. We can... is it nice? I was just going to say we can gain some sentries, but actually how much do we care about that? Maybe sentry isn't even that useful here, because... Yeah, what are we going to do? I think what we're going to do... Is Chapel even that good here? So this is an interesting thing, actually. I'm just trying to look at this board, and I'm not sure what's very good. A part of me wants to think that Sentry is nice. We can play Militia quite a lot. That tends to destroy most types of decks that are going on here. We would really like to play Bandit to gain a high density of golds in order to buy provinces. It's really hard to gain cards otherwise. I don't think Artisan works well with Gardens or Duchies. One of the reasons why Workshop Gardens works is because you can gain workshops with workshops for a 3rd pile. So Artisan's not really that good in these sort of victory point sloggy games. I think maybe this is sort of the rare board where actually we don't go for Chapel. Is that really the case? Well, surely not, right? Because I think we want to have a deck that has a really high density of gold cards. So what we're actually going to do is we are going to trash down. We might pick up a sentry, but we are going to get a bandit at some point, and then we're going to try and be clean, and we're going to play a load of bandits to just get a load of golds. We probably stop playing the militia because we'd rather play bandit, but I think we keep it around, and some turns it will help us to hit province just because it's a card that generates 2. So I think that's what we do. I think there's no room for Artisan here. We haven't got the terminal space, and there are just these nice attacks that are doing a lot for us and are slowing down our opponent. So I think that's what we try and do. So I think, again, Artisan actually doesn't get picked up on this board. So not a good start for Artisan. Me saying how strong it is, and then all these kingdoms are not buying it. So here we have, again, a no trashing witch kingdom. We do have village as our only village, but, we've got witch. And there's all this cursing, and it's actually quite difficult to get through our deck. We have workshop. There's a lot of cards to gain with workshop if we want to. So we could workshop for villages, harbingers, merchant, poachers, and militia. But, well, there is moat. Is the engine bad enough here that we actually workshop for villages and moats, and we just get good moat coverage, and we try and avoid these attacks, and we try and draw through a deck that still has 10 junk cards in it? I mean, a part of me feels like that's no good. I think that you will still miss your moats a bunch of the time just because you have so much junk and you can't get them that quickly. So witch is really important, and if you're playing witch, then you're not playing this stuff. And that means that you are going to struggle. I think we've got to get the witches first. So we open militia and we open silver. It's fairly standard. And we try and get the witch or two. Again, I think artisan might struggle just because there's no real engine again on this board. The draw is too bad, +2 cards or council room. You really don't want that. There's a lot of cantrips that you can't make use of. Again, Harbinger probably okay. But I think is it really just witch and militia, big money again? I think it is. And for that reason, you don't really want artisan because you're not drawing your deck and you're not really getting any villages. Pretty sad. One of these days we'll have a better kingdom. Here we go. This is looking a bit better. So we have sentry for trashing. Workshop can gain us villages and vassals, but we don't really need workshop because we've got artisan instead. We want to hit 5. Would I go vassal militia? I think that's too much of a risk. I might just go silver militia. And we really want to get sentries first, and we want to get the sentries before the witch in this case. I would happily pick up 1, possibly 2. Maybe I will workshop to gain just a load of villages and vassals, but I really want an artisan on this board to gain extra sentries and markets and probably witches as well, which is going to be our main draw. I think we can skip council room here. I think we can gain sentries a lot early on to try and increase our odds of thinning down quite well, and then we will still be getting the witches because it's draw, but we won't really be caring about attacking our opponent that much. I can see that we could probably fit in a workshop as well, but we don't want too many stop cards here because we really want to be playing a load of markets and vassals to get a load of money when we can. So I think artisan does work here. I think I'm not there's no way to go out of my way to specifically try and spike all the way up to 6, but I definitely take it if I get it. Otherwise, I'm happy to just focus on sentry. So if I get as soon as I hit 6, I'm buying an artisan, but I won't care about hitting it specifically until my deck is a little bit more under control. And then I'm going to be using artisan to gain markets, while I could have a workshop to gain villages and vassals. And then eventually I might start picking up some witches with artisan instead. I might alternate between a bunch of these different cards. And eventually we get to the stage where we are double provincing. I think we can do that, and we can probably do that with very few treasures. We'll always have the militia to play as well. So it's going to be kind of cantrippy, village, vassal, market, sentry. These are sort of the cards we'll have the most of in our deck. We've got a little bit of draw, and I think that's what we do. We might get a council room pretty late on just to push past these provinces that we have. If we need more draw and it's quite late and maybe all the curses have gone, I might consider picking up a council room just to push past. Well, we do have militia, thinking about it. I always sort of forget this combo. So maybe militia's going to be... Maybe council room's better than witch. Because we can play the militias. Once our deck is going, I think we stop getting the witches. We actually swap over to council room, and then we just try and make sure play militia. This gives us a load more room to draw and to gain golds. Although they're not so great with vassal, I think we could do it. Okay, so anyway, artisan's going to be pretty important there, but I don't know how many of them we can actually get. We could probably only really deal with one of them because we can't go too fast. Till we get to artisan. So what's happening here? So village and throne room are villages. We've got chapel for trashing, so that's nice. So we trash all the way down. What's our draw? It's only council room and library. Is there anything cute we can do with library? One of the problems here is the only way to get money is treasures. So if we trash down a lot, library, I mean, it's got cellar, but we don't really want like library golds. It doesn't really make for a very good deck. What is Artisan even gaining here? You don't want too many of these, I guess. Like workshop to gain villages and throne room seems quite nice, but is throne room even so good here? What are you going to throne? There's not really many good cards to throne, honestly, because you could throne workshop, but that would just get you more throne rooms. It would be nice to have an artisan to gain a bunch of duchies towards the end, but how will we do? I think... I was going to say, I think we're just kind of forced to play with council room here and give our opponent good turns. There is no attack, so how good is skipping chapel and just going for money instead? I kind of don't like it. I don't think mine big money is really a thing. But council room big money is a thing. If our opponent does that, that also makes library worse. Can we improve our deck after chapeling down quickly enough to make drawing with council room and just not caring about an opponent that's doing big money? I think if we do that, then actually I don't know how good Artisan can be, because we really want to be spending all of our sixes on golds, and there aren't really that many cards that we actually care to pick up that Workshop can't. We can just buy a second council room at some point. But I do like throning the Artisan to gain duchies towards the end. Maybe that's how we beat a big money player. This is a difficult board. Part of me thinks that the engine just doesn't have anything to do is its big problem. The best thing you can do in this engine is to like throne an Artisan, but I just don't care. What you could do instead is throne a workshop, and instead of having an Artisan, you have a mine, and then you throne it and you turn the silvers into golds, but oh, it's so bad. It just feels awful. Yeah, I don't know if duchies are good enough to... But you get a lot of points if you throne Artisans at the end, and you can draw a lot of cards with throne room, village, and you got chapel, right? Like, it's not hard to draw your deck here. It's just you don't have any money. Maybe we do get the Artisan. We look to buy one province and gain 2 duchies, and that's sort of the equivalent of double province to try and beat the big money player, except it's a lot quicker to get it set up, because actually getting to 16 money is just too difficult on this board. Yeah, okay, I think that's what we do. So I think we do get an Artisan here. Maybe we don't get it on the first 6. Maybe we're looking to get a gold instead. But once we're able to hit 8, like the first time we do that, or we like hit a 7 or something, we look to get an Artisan instead. And we will have a workshop before then. Maybe we're going to open Chapel Workshop. I think I prefer Chapel Silver. I think we do want a council room at some point. But I think we will be getting like throne rooms, workshops. And we will be building up with this, and we can throne workshop for some silvers early on, and then we build up to trying to get to gold and then Artisan, and then we can throne Artisan for duchies, and we just, or like duchy and a council room, and eventually we're going to try and keep drawing, and we hope to just beat the big money player, but well, I don't know. So yeah, so I think Artisan works here. I think it's our main payload, but I'm not super happy about it. Anyway, that was Artisan. I think those boards were actually slightly unfair on Artisan overall. Like, we never drew it with like Laboratory or something, but Artisan, like, with all these gainers, as the cards get better and you add expansions, they get better. Artisan is incredibly strong on some games. When you have very powerful cards and you can play a lot of Artisans very quickly, just you gain so much good stuff very fast. So it's generally a very powerful card. Anyway, that was the Artisan video, and that was the last of the base game videos as well. We've done every base game card now. I hope you enjoyed all these videos. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.